of Orlando, Florida, you are listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor here in beautiful Central Florida, David Gornoski. So glad to be with you here in beautiful Florida with my special visitor here today, my great ally, my chief science advisor, Dr. Wei-Ping Yu.
Thank you, David. Congratulations for your new season and the new schedule hours.
Oh, I can't wait. You know, we had a lot of fun in the last episodes going through all kinds of topics. And for those who aren't familiar, A Neighbor's Choice, we're all about solving the problems ourselves. We don't rely on the media or big government to tell us what to think or how to process data. We take the news stories and we actually look for the real meat, the substance that really makes us really get excited. You know, the things that we really want to solve, things like how do we get clean energy without relying on big government? How do we get, justice without relying on big prison sentences and all kinds of fines and regulations and all that nonsense? We're all about personhood, liberty, and peace. That's what we all want as neighbors, and that's what we do each episode on A Neighbor's Choice. And we'll be coming to you every day now, Monday through Thursday. Thursdays, we'll be doing a big Mega Monday show. Next week will be 7 to 9 live here on WFLA. And Tuesdays through Thursdays, we'll be doing 8 to 9 every evening. So you don't want to miss it. But we have had a lot of news going on this week, and so we're going to jump right into it with my guest, John Baeza. Are you here with us?
I am here. How are you, Dave?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Doing very well.
Now, for those who don't know, John Baeza is a good friend of mine here in Florida, and he is a former NYPD detective, and he has written several scholarly papers dealing with false reports, dealing with special victims crimes, rape, serial rape, how to deal with getting true confessions, not bogus confessions. And what was interesting, John also was the head of security for Ron Paul and Rand Paul's presidential campaigns, and he's a great advocate for liberty and the rule of law. So last week, when this whole story about Jussie Smollett was going on, where this actor over there in Chicago had come up with, it looks like, could be a staged event. We're not sure yet. But John, being the great detective that he is and being someone who's trained in this type of, of course, he's not on the case, but just he had emailed me saying that he had seen some red flags. And so I said, I got to have John on here to dissect this story of the week. So, John, thanks for coming.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
So just kind of dive in here, kind of set the stage for what really gave you some red flags. You spent years working on dealing with trying to put together confessions, which ones are accurate, which ones are not. So kind of walk us through some of the red flags that popped out that gave you insight before the media caught on that there could be some problems here with Jussie Smollett's alleged hate crime situation.
Well, there were several things that popped out at me that were red flags. And, of course, that does not mean automatically that somebody is lying, but it's something that has to be explained. You can't just explain it away. So one of the things, there was about 16 things I think I had, but one of them was, why is there no video footage of the attack, but yet we have video footage of everything else? It was just a question that I had. Another question I had was, how did he end up holding on to his Subway sandwich and apparently his salad after being apparently beaten about the face by two masked and gloved attackers? And also, he said he was on the phone at the time, and I didn't understand why he or the person he was on the phone with wouldn't have either hung up, put him on hold, and called 911. And going back to that phone, since it is evidence, if somebody was attacking somebody like that, the phone would be one of the things that somebody would take from the victim if he was in fact a victim in this case, the phone would be taken because it would be evidence, and they surely would know he would have been on it at the time. So that really started things up, and I'm sure other people saw some of that too. It's kind of common sense, a lot of it, but there were other things too that the video camera did show him holding the sandwich as he was coming to the building, and it did also show him wearing this apparently a thin rope, considered a noose, I guess, apparently, a noose type rope around his neck. But the interesting thing about that was that 40 minutes later, when police arrived, he was still wearing that around his neck. Now, that is unusual behavior. Again, not necessarily saying that it's somebody who's lying about it, but it is extremely unusual if somebody puts a noose around your neck and allegedly pours bleach on you. It would not be considered normal behavior just by a human being to keep that noose hanging around your neck. That would be one of the things that you would want to take off because you have been attacked, and you don't want to have. That's one of the things you don't want. Because you don't have any. You don't want to remember this attack immediately. You want to take that off. So that really struck me. What also struck me was the fact that he said he had bleach poured on him. Now, that brought up a point that I think was very important. Well, at least a clue that could be very important. If people were out waiting in the 2-degree weather, I believe it was 2 or less degrees. It could have been lower than that, but I think I looked it up. I think it was about 2 degrees. If somebody was out with bleach, let's say it was a normal Clorox type bleach. If somebody was out with that bleach and they were outside with the bleach for any period of time, okay, and not holding it in a car or in a house somewhere or keeping it warm, bleach will get slushy at 27 degrees Fahrenheit if it's out for any period of time, and it will freeze at 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, and this has been I have followed up on this, and this has been confirmed by Clorox, the company. Now, of course, that's Clorox, but they're pretty much the same makeup of the bleach. So I thought it was unusual, and I thought it was a clue that if somebody was in waiting, why would this bleach not? Would it be liquid? Why would it not be frozen or slushy and so forth? And I've already talked about the phone call, and I don't want to get long-winded, but I just want to cover a couple other things, and then let you go into some questions here. Also, he was claimed to have been beaten about the face, but I looked at the photo of him at the hospital after the event, and I only saw, and I'm no doctor, okay, but I only saw what appeared to be minor abrasions, and abrasions are like skin knees or fingernail scrapes, to name just two. They're not major lacerations or anything like that. And they were on, what I saw was on the right side of his face. I also noticed that he wore his watch on his left hand, which doesn't mean for certain that he's right-handed, but it would, lead me to believe that he possibly could be right-handed. And in cases, again, this is anecdotal, but in cases that I've had, in every case that I've had where somebody has actually injured themselves on the face, they've used their strong hand on their strong hand side. And a lot of times it would be, the abrasions would be caused by either fingernail scrapings or using something to scrape themselves on the face. But it would be used by the strong hand. So that itself was a red flag. And I didn't understand why it took so long to go to the hospital. I don't understand if he had his phone. Why not call 911 immediately? I think I talked about that. And why not go to the hospital immediately or take an ambulance? Apparently that wasn't the case. And it just seemed a bit odd to me because I've handled or been involved in thousands of these of attacks and rape cases, and not just rape, but attacks and so forth. And, ambulances are typically, you would take an ambulance to the hospital when this happens, especially if you've been beaten about the face and had, by 2 masked men and so forth. that could be very scary. The other thing was the delay in handing over his phone and the redaction of when he did hand over records, he redacted certain phone numbers. And, he did say that he trusted the police, but in the meantime, he redacted certain phone numbers. And if you do that when you're dealing with the police, again, it's very possible that you don't want to give over personal information. But in this case, two masked men attacked him at 2 o'clock in the morning. So you would think you would want to give them everything you could to solve this case. And last but not least, I'll get into one more thing, which is the threatening letter that was received from Fox.
Hold on 1 second. We're speaking with former Detective John Baeza from the NYPD, and you're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. On the other side, we're going to find out what was going on with this mysterious letter that Mr. Smollett had reported. And on the other side, we'll get right that. It's A Neighbor's Choice with David Gornoski. We'll see you in a second.
Oh, Cinnamon, where you gonna run to? Cinnamon, where you gonna run to? Where you gonna run to? All on that day.
And welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Gornoski, and I'm talking to our good friend John Baeza, my go-to guy for understanding criminal justice, an expert in many fields, including false allegations and false reports, solving serial rape. I mean, John spent a very decorated career in the NYPD, solving some of the worst, atrocious crimes you could imagine. And he is a true detective to this day. He's always putting out more papers, always working as an expert witness, dealing with really complicated stories in the justice system. His website, NYPDtruth.com. That's NYPDtruth.com. And we're talking with him about the story with Mr. Smollett and what was going on in Chicago, where it looks like he created a kind of a hoax, it looks like. But again, we're just kind of going over this from a true detective's perspective. And John, on the before the break, we were talking what was going on with that letter that was sent out. I looked at that, and to me, that was a red flag because I looked at it had all kinds of cutout clip art and stuff from magazines, and I was like, that looks like something from Batman Forever from the 1997 movie with the Riddler when he was sending all these secret messages to Batman. I was like, if there's some kind of, rogue random rednecks in Chicago in 0 degree temperature, I don't think they are creative with arts and crafts to that degree. I mean, that looked like Hollywood Batman Forever, like work there,
Well, you know what? You are very, very correct on that, Dave. As usual, you're very sharp. And that's what I thought when I saw the letter. And what I've seen with letters that have cut out, letters that are sent that have cut out letters from books or magazines. By what I mean is like, an A or a B or a C or whatever that are cut out from books or magazines and placed and glued into place and so forth. They very well may be what turns out to be a red flag sent by an alleged victim or someone they knew to support a future claim of an attack. And I've found in my career, and I've been involved in over 300 arrests and as an expert in many more cases where I've reviewed false reports, where these letters that were sent with cut out, alphabet letters and kind of glued together, like you said, they are not always, but I quite frankly can't think of a time they haven't been. But I'm going to just hesitate a bit to say I'm going to say not always because I don't know for sure, but they are indicators of a false report of a threat. There is absolutely no doubt, and you had that right on the you hit that right on the head, and that's one of the things that struck me as well. Although that hadn't been talked about too much, now it is being talked about, but it was just mentioned kind of briefly, and they said the FBI was dealing with it. But
I just don't know too many creative arts and crafts rednecks that are trying to be. And it just didn't even make no sense to me. Like the Riddler or something. So. Well,
yes, and you know what happens? That is what I call TV behavior, because many people see this on TV shows, movies, and so forth, where threatening letters are sent, and cut out letters from magazines or articles and put them in there to spell something out, and that comes from movies and TVs, and that's what a lot of the false reporters will do, and they'll send them to themselves or have somebody send it to them. So that's what happens.
And we're speaking here with retired Detective John Baeza, former head of security for Ron Paul and Rand Paul's presidential campaigns, and an expert in many areas, including things like child abuse, excessive force, false arrests, narcotics investigations. He's run the whole gamut. And I always turn to John whenever I see a story in the headlines that involves some type of detective work, which so glad to have you there, John, because no one does it like you. I haven't met anybody like that. And I think that's why, John's been all over Fox News and CNN and MSNBC, all over the place over the years, being an expert case examiner on news programs, because he gets it. He's got a sharp, and I want to talk to you about all these false allegations and false reports. I understand that sometimes those numbers are not as low as we think. And by the way, if you want to ask John a question, you can at 866-916-5400. That's 866-916-5400. John, tell me a little bit about those false reports here, because this could be one of those with the Smollett case.
Yeah, well, if you were talking about the numbers, the original number that is always used is a 2% number. Everybody says there's a 2% rate of false reports, and that actually, I have an article on it that I've read, and I've written about it. And what it is it actually is not a study. It was an actual comment by a judge that was made, offhand, that had no backing scientifically or anything at all. And again, it defied what I found in my work. Again, it's not scientific, but it's anecdotal. But my work, I've seen thousands of cases, and out of those thousands of cases, I would say 20 to 30% of the cases were false reports, which means, 70 to 80% of the cases were real. So what happens is that you take away manpower to investigate these false reports from actual victims. And in this case, if I might mention it, just in February, there was a 1-year-old child who was shot and is in a coma in Chicago, and his name is Dajon Irving. And, while 25, I believe I read it was 25 detectives were involved in this case, and probably more police officers and supervisors and so forth, and manpower, where was the manpower when they were, this takes away the manpower from that to the shooting death of a 1-year-old child who was just sitting in a car and was hit by a stray bullet and hit in the head and is on life support at this time. And, this is what really, really drove me to get involved in the specialization of false reports, because I think it takes away so much from the real victims. And I found that out from talking to my victims and asking them about it, and they agreed with me.
And not only that, but you also have to put on what you have elucidated before on this program and others, which is that so much of example with Chicago's police department, and like every other major city, most of their manpower is going to solving the victimless crimes, the drugs, the petty stuff. There's no victim on the police report. So you've got all those resources and manpower devoted for that, chasing after these no-win drug wars and things. And then you add in these false reports like what appears maybe is going on with the Smollett case, and you've got a really sorry situation for justice for real victims in our governmental police system today. Don't you see? Don't you think?
I agree completely. In fact, Chicago Police Department, their clearance rate for murders, a typical city, say like New York or L.A., might have a 59, 60% clearance rate. Chicago waivers between 15 and 17% clearance rate. That is abysmal. That is abysmal, and it is horrifying to think that if you were shot in Chicago, there's only a 15 to 17% chance that your case would be solved.
Now,
that's just sad.
Now, if it turns out that they can, find evidence and make a case for Smollett, what is he looking at in terms of what's likely? You've also worked in the correction side of the justice system. What's the likely situation he'll face if he's convicted of what it looks like it could have been, a hoax?
Well, here you have the case you have because he is a celebrity, and he's going to have he can afford expensive attorneys. He's going to have what other defendants don't have, and that is a lot of legal help. But he faces up to 3 years in jail in Chicago under Illinois law for a felony for making a false report. But I have to tell you that if the police have said and have come out and stated that the two men that they questioned with an attorney present for 3 days admitted that they had purchased the rope and so forth, and then they let them go. Now, that would never, even in Chicago, that wouldn't happen unless they felt that they were going to have them, probably more than likely, have them testify against Smollett, and especially with an attorney. Because if you have an attorney present and you're not working out a deal, no attorney is in their right mind is going to let you be questioned for 3 days. It's just not going to happen unless you're working with a prosecutor to work out some sort of a deal. So that's what I feel is going behind the scenes, or had been going on behind the scenes. I don't know for sure. I have read that it may go to a grand jury this week, but that's an unsubstantiated report so far. But I could see that happening. I could see that happening at this point. The only issue is that he is a celebrity, and typically, as we know, and he has money, and race and so forth really don't come into play when you have money, because it's whether you're white, black, Asian, whatever. If you don't have money as a defendant, you're not going to have the ability to maybe work out some sort of a deal, especially because he's so famous. So that's what I foresee with this coming up. And again, we say if, I still have to say if, but I mean, it's becoming clearer and clearer to me that this is more than likely, and probably the only truth that come out of this would be that it would be a hoax. But again, we still have to wait and see.
So let's take a step back and go up to the bigger picture here. Why do you think these I've seen hundreds of hoaxes, it looks like, over the last few years, where people are creating graffiti, making it look like there's a neo-Nazi here or a swastika here. Not that of course there are real people that are into that stuff in real life, but there seems to be kind of an escalating, I guess you would call it an epidemic of these hoax stories of people trying to create what are hate crimes. Why do you think this is happening? I mean, I know you're a detective. We're speaking with John Baeza, a police expert who is dissecting the unfortunate case of Jussie Smollett, and you can visit his website, NYPDtruth.com. What would you say is why is this happening so rapidly in our society, where we're getting all these false allegations? And I mean, you look at the Justice Kavanaugh situation, where they were throwing out all these accusations that were unfounded with no basis in evidence and everything. What's going on here? It seems like our society is going off the rails here with these people wanting to become victims to gain social status.
Right, I understand exactly what the question is, and here's my answer to it. Is back in the 60s and the 70s, the police mentality was, you always question a victim, and a lot of times detectives didn't believe a victim, whether they were telling the truth or not. And it has completely gone to the opposite direction, where now, and even when I was in during the 90s, where detectives just would, even in a case like this where it was questionable, would just explain away stuff and actually just believe a victim no matter what. And that swing from not believing to believing, that's not a good swing. There has to be a middle ground where you come in and you have to be skeptical of everything, and you have to make sure there are no breaks in logic, and you can't explain away things. You can't say, okay, well, this doesn't make sense, but so what? You can't do that, and I've seen it happen many times. But if you're talking about we're talking about the Me Too movement, if you will, and I see a lot of this, people jumping on bandwagons, and maybe some of these people have been victimized and so forth. But what I see it is as one of the main motives. Motive is dynamic. It's not always easy to decipher. And in false report cases, there are numerous motives, revenge and so forth. But the one that I see the most is the need for attention, and also lawsuits. And what happens if people start seeing that everybody is going to be believed automatically, and the press is just going to automatically report the cases if it's completely true and not even question it whatsoever, they will jump in. Right. And if they have a need for publicity or money or, whatever, there's always a motive there somewhere, and you'll find it. And it's just like in the Me Too movement. Now, again, some of these men or women who claim that they were sexually assaulted or harassed may well have been. But it's my feeling that that's not the case in all these cases. I think a lot of people have jumped on the bandwagon because they know their story's not going to be questioned at all.
Right. And I think the real key for takeaway for everybody listening here is we've got to get to a consensus that if there is no victim, there is no crime, because that's really going to open up a lot of resources and manpower to cut through a lot of the lies. And actually, it's another side effect of getting rid of these victimless crime laws is that you will eliminate so much of this victim mentality that's going on in society, right? I wrote a piece out this week that was called "Our Society is a Shame Factory." And I think that has to do with kind of what's going on here with why the media gets so caught up in a groupthink mentality that, oh my goodness, look, this is evidence that people, even a celebrity like this young man, Jussie Smollett, he is an example of this hysterical, violence against victim groups. But guess what? Look, why don't we deal with the real problem? How can you sit there and say as a society, oh, let's go ahead and keep voting for Hillary Clintons and Bushes and Obamas and all these people that keep people in prison for petty nonviolent stuff for years, and then it creates all this shame and resentment in society, and then people feel like they need to express themselves, and so they start getting into this delusional sense where we get these hoaxes. So let's get to let's cut through all the fat, right, John? That's what I like to do. Let's cut through the fat, and let's get to the principles. And let's have real justice, and let's have real peace.
Agreed. And one final comment for you, if you have time.
Sure.
I'd just like to say that, one of the things is we don't train. There's no training for detectives across the United States, including in New York City, on how to determine what's a false report or what's not. There's no training. That was on the job. I had a very good detective who actually taught me how to do this and how to do it correctly. But there's no training for it. But I could tell you this much. This happened on January 29th. And if somebody who had the case, who had some training in false reports, even without all the two people, the two men that were supposedly involved in this, even without knowing all that, if you had interviewed him on that night and brought him into the station house, within 2 hours, you should have been able to get his confession that this was a false report, because at that time he is the most vulnerable to not, he hasn't had time to think about what you might ask him.
Right.
So you could ask him questions that, at this time he might already have an answer to, but at that time he might not. And I actually think that it's a training issue as well. And, here we are dealing with this. It could have been dealt with, I think, in a couple of days. Now, I'm not bashing the Chicago Police Department. I think they did a good job with it. But I do think that if there was training involved, it could have been taken care of within days. And I have had cases similar, not so high profile like this, but high profile, where the case, I can't remember any case that went on more than a day and a half that didn't get solved.
Well, thank you for being with us again, John Baeza. He's a former detective at NYPD, and he's an expert like no other that I know. NYPDtruth.com. Go there. And, John, I want to do something. I'm not just all about, dissecting the bogus victimless crime laws we have. I also want to dive into on this program how to equip local police with the right techniques to get the real justice for real flesh and blood victims, because I'm tired of seeing, like you said, that poor little kid in Chicago who has resources, very few, to actually solve the crime. We need a real reckoning with our justice system. So thanks again, John, for being on the program.
Thank you for having me, Dave.
All right. Well, folks, we'll be right back. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski. We'll see you in just a second. There's lots more to unpack. Hi, this is David Gornoski, founder of A Neighbor's Choice. A Neighbor's Choice is sponsored by people just like you, making weekly or monthly contributions to support the development of this show, which is dedicated to introducing Jesus' personhood revolution to the broader public. Visit www.aneighborschoice.com, click on Contribute, and start your monthly pledge today. We appreciate your support. A Neighbor's Choice Radio, the show that goes to the problems, to the heart of the problems that we have today. We're not going to sit and slink back into partisan groupthink and just say, oh, let's just hire some politicians every 2 years and then just complain about the other side. That's very boring. It's very not American. America was all about self-reliance. It's all about rolling up our sleeves as neighbors and solving problems as individuals, not as collective cogs in some kind of hive mind. Those days are over. That's why the media is grasping this dying old TV media is just falling apart, because they're trying to keep us all locked down like little lemmings, fearful and angry. And that, you know, there was it's called the TV negative mindset that they've conditioned people to be in for generations, where we're at each other's throat. There's Nazis in every closet. I mean, goodness gracious. It's like they just want to keep us all depressed and feeling like our neighbors, we can't trust them. And guess what? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people listen to the TV and some of the old dinosaur newspapers, the more likely they are to start believing that the world it's called the mean world syndrome. Look it up. It's the idea that TV creates a mean, agitated, kind of dark, truncated reality distortion. And we have been in it for long enough, folks. And now with the age of digital media and radio and digital are coming together, and I believe they can be used as a populist grassroots vice grip to push the old vicious groupthink mentality of the old media out of the culture. Because that's what we want. We want to have a free flow of ideas. We want to have difference of opinions. We want to have diversity of viewpoints and color and all of those wonderful things. Those are all wonderful, but we can only get there if we ground ourselves in media which treats people as individuals, as people who are endowed with sacred honor because of their humanity, and people who are not stuck in some kind of nihilism where there is no truth, there is no meaning. You've seen this on the news, by the way. All the politicians, it's very catchy on the left, especially, to say my truth. This is my truth. There's no such thing as my truth. That's called a feeling, and feelings are good, and they can be aligned with truthful feeling and truthful ideas, but subjective truth is no place to build a society. You have to have a grounding in objective truth. There are objective truths. There are objective truths of nature. There are objective truths of the human spirit. There are objective truths of economics. And that reminds me, this last weekend I enjoyed speaking at the University of Central Florida at the Mises Institute. They did a wonderful conference, and I spoke about some of these topics that I do here on this program, which, of course, you can hear now Monday through Thursdays live from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. You're going to love it. We're going to have a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see all of the feedback that I continue to get. We have fans from all over the world, because this broadcast doesn't just go here on FM and AM. It also goes out to our audience on Facebook and our audience on the iHeartRadio app. So there are many ways to contact us, and we've been in talks with some other stations across the country. So there's a lot of exciting things going on with A Neighbor's Choice, because we are not going to be telling you about the same old boring topics. We just brought on a world-class detective to dissect the Smollett case. We're not going to get stuck on the partisan games about it. We're going to dissect it, get you to the truth of the story, and move you on to more interesting real-world issues. Whether it's science, innovation, medicine, we're going to go through all of it because I know you're just like me. You still want to hear a little bit about what's going on in the news every now and then just to kind of understand where your neighbors, programming is kind of, the context for it. But you also want to hear the news that you don't get on the mainstream media. You want to hear about alternative, powerful ideas for how the world really is in science, or how energy can be, or how we can solve problems of, poverty, or how technology can lift us up, or how we can have, prosperity in a more decentralized economy. There's a lot of opportunities that we can, investigate if we go and seek out these alternative sources of information. And that's what A Neighbor's Choice is going to be, and is always going to have as our forefront mission, to bring in the outsiders, the misfits, the people, the renegades, and also the newsmakers, and let you hear what's really going on behind the headlines. That's what we're all about. We're about liberty, we're about peace, and we're about solving things without groupthink. So you're going to look forward to so many more interviews like Baeza. We've got a lot of special guests later on this week, and you can't miss it one bit. Every night, Monday through Thursday, here on WFLA News Radio. We'll see you in just a second for our Science Look at Tomorrow Today in just a moment. A Neighbor's Choice Radio is back. And I am your host, David Gornoski, here for our final segment, our Look at Tomorrow Today, with my chief science advisor and theoretical physicist, Dr. Wei-Ping Yu, here to digest the news topics related to science and innovation, as always. Dr. Yu, I want to go quickly here to some of the top stories I'm seeing here. I noticed that there's a big interest in this magnetic pole shift. I've seen a lot of apocalyptic headlines in the news about how Earth's magnetic poles are shifting a little bit. They're moving, and some people are worried and speculating that maybe this shift in poles, if it gets too out of control here, might open us up to dangerous levels of solar radiation or all kinds of other things that could be dangerous to the human health. So as a physicist yourself, what's your opinion on this?
So this was a big concern in the past, because so what happens if truly North Pole shift to the South Pole? So one concern is that going to trigger massive earthquake, or cause climate change, or species extinctions, right?
Right.
So, based on the physics, I don't believe any of that one can happen.
So that is a false myth. Don't worry about it.
Right. It may have a, detection, you may pulse north and south and determine the direction.
So you might get lost at sea.
Slightly. With the current technology, we can easily correct them with our GPS system. So should have no, like a Y2K type of worry.
So you don't think cars are going to be flying off of bridges and stuff, right?
No, I don't believe. Another thing you mentioned during the break. So what kind of things cause that? Right, it could be caused by some kind of event happen on Earth, but I'm more inclined to this is related to the solar space weather, potentially because the solar magnetic field is in shifting.
Very interesting.
When solar magnetic shifting, Earth's magnetic will shift with that.
So it all revolves around the sun.
That's right. In the past, we had hundreds recorded, magnetic pole switch, and I don't believe I have caused any species extinctions before.
Now, I see another headline here at sciencealert.com. It says neuroscientists say they found an entirely new form of neural communication. It says scientists think they've identified a previously unknown form of communication between brain tissue. They were able to sever two pieces of a brain, and they were communicating each other even with space. And the article goes on to say that no one knows what the implications of that are or what the mysterious process that is unrelated to, quote, every other conventionally understood mechanism. Now, this was interesting to me, Dr. Yu, because I know you have an interesting take on human biology when it relates to a certain force.
Human brain, the mystery of human brain. This is actually, that's how brain communicate. Left brain and the right brain, they do have gaps.
Right.
Remember, the brain communicate is not like traditional. We mentioned about chemical process. It has to contact, or electrical process. You have to connect the wire. No, that's because we did not understand how brain really function and thinking. It's actually the magnetic induction, it's a magnetic process. When you have a magnetic field oscillation, electrical field generate a magnetic field, right? When we mentioned about it, we know neuron have a slow magnetic wave, oscillations. What that oscillation do? They said that we don't know that one. But actually, that oscillation create a moving magnetic field. That moving magnetic field create induction. That means you can cross gaps, space, and transmit information.
So the brain has the ability to transmit information across space.
Cross space. That's exactly.
How about brain to brain?
Actually, if you're resonant in the same frequency, you can receive other people's thinking remotely.
Wow, very interesting. Folks, listen again. We just solved some new interesting discoveries. We've got more to unpack. But you see, the neuroscientists, they're in the dark because, unfortunately, they're working within the mainstream, which is kind of slowly, it's kind of ends up becoming truncated and corrupted by some of the special interests that control the bodies of knowledge in the mainstream media. But that's why we here at A Neighbor's Choice don't let them have the final say. We unpack it and show that there's more out there than you can possibly imagine, including what our brains are possibly able to do. Folks, we'll stay tuned for tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll have another program here on A Neighbor's Choice at 8 in the evening. You're listening to the most electrifying show. We'll see you tomorrow night. I'm David Gornoski. Godspeed.
Hi, this is David Gornoski, founder of A Neighbor's Choice. A Neighbor's Choice is sponsored by people just like you, making weekly or monthly contributions to support the development of this show, which is dedicated to introducing Jesus' personhood revolution to the broader public. Visit www.aneighborschoice.com, click on Contribute, and start your monthly pledge today. We